Somewhere on this planet, at this very moment, a politician is standing before a microphone and explaining why a certain group of people must be punished, restrained, liberated, sanctioned, bombed, or saved. The audience is nodding. The reasons sound convincing. They always do. They sounded convincing in 431 BC when Athens decided to annihilate Milos for the crime of neutrality. They sounded convincing in 1933 when a failed painter explained to Germany that its misfortunes had a single, identifiable cause. They sound convincing now in an era when a world leader can threaten to annex a neighboring democracy's territory over breakfast, kidnap a foreign head of state before lunch, and impose tariffs on the entire planet by dinner, and still be described, with a straight face, as a champion of freedom. The world has always been a lunatic asylum. This is not a metaphor. It is a structural observation, grounded in formal theories of complex systems, and the fact that it also happens to be darkly funny does not make it less true. What changes from century to century is not the madness itself, but the costumes it wears. The toga gives way to the military uniform, the military uniform to the business suit, the business suit to the polo shirt worn at a rally where the crowd has been instructed to look spontaneous. The rhetoric evolves, the underlying mechanics do not. This book is an attempt to examine those mechanics, not the daily news. The daily news is noise, and one of the book's early arguments is that noise exists precisely to prevent us from hearing the signal, not the personalities. The cult of personality is itself one of the mechanisms, and treating a given leader as the cause of a crisis rather than its symptom is one of the oldest tricks in the political playbook. What this book examines are the structural patterns that recur across centuries, across cultures, across ideological divides, with the regularity that would be tedious if it were not so consequential. Why do empires always generate their own opposition? Why does every liberation movement eventually produce its own oppressors? Why do civilian populations on every side of every conflict end up as hostages of games they did not choose and cannot escape? Why does corruption persist despite ever increasing punishment? Why does terrorism survive every war designed to eliminate it? Why does the most powerful nation on earth periodically behave as though it has lost its collective mind? The conventional answers to these questions tend to fall into two categories. The first category is moral. Bad people do bad things, and if we could somehow install good people in positions of power, the madness would stop. This answer is comforting, widely believed, and demonstrably false. The second category is conspiratorial. Shadowy forces manipulate events behind the scenes, and if we could somehow expose and defeat them, the madness would stop. This answer is exciting, increasingly popular, and also false, not because conspiracies do not exist, they do, constantly, and most of them are far less competent than the conspiracy theorists imagine, but because the madness does not require a conspiracy. It requires only the ordinary operation of structural forces that are as impersonal as gravity and considerably less well understood. The approach taken in this book draws on a body of formal research in complex systems theory that has, in recent years, begun to illuminate the structural logic of social, institutional, and political dynamics with uncomfortable clarity. The theory of conflict as a phase transition, for instance, demonstrates that escalation in coupled networks is not a property of individual temperaments, but a property of network topology. When the structural coupling between groups exceeds a critical threshold, escalation becomes inevitable regardless of who starts it. 1. The four principles of corruption establish that institutional corruption is not an emergent property of institutional friction, not individual moral failure, and that increasing punishment does not reduce corruption but merely changes its form. 2. The asymmetry of totalizing ideals proves that the pursuit of any ideal